Before you judge the ending, you need to understand the beginning. On December 16th, 2004, Lisa Montgomery committed a crime so devastating it would etch her name into history. In 2021, she became the first woman executed by the US government in nearly 70 years. She was punished for taking a life and for stealing another before it even began. Lisa Montgomery's story is one of the most complicated and haunting I've ever told. But Lisa Montgomery's story also doesn't start there. It started decades earlier, hidden behind closed doors where unimaginable trauma built up, like a pot left on a stove until it finally exploded. And the story isn't just about a brutal crime. It's a story about systemic failure, about survival, and about what happens when mercy is nowhere to be found. It's also a story that's going to divide people. One side is going to see a monster, and the other might see a life that was never given a chance to begin with. But today, we're looking at the whole story. Hi everyone, and welcome to the channel. I'm Ray Review, and I tell a lot of dark true crime stories here. So viewer discretion is advised, but if you like spoken true crime stories, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps out way more than you realize. And if you're interested for deeper dives or behind the scenes access, or just want to support the channel, please consider joining my private community on Patreon, where we have you covered there. So without further ado, let's dive into the story of Lisa Montgomery. So to understand Lisa Montgomery's crime, we need to start from the beginning. It began in a trailer deep in the Oklahoma woods, into a childhood that nightmares are made of. Lisa Montgomery was born on February 27th in 1968 to a woman named Judy Shaughnessy. She was a woman described by family and neighbors as erratic and cruel, and honestly, Lisa Montgomery was doomed before she was born. Her mother, Judy, struggled with substance abuse while she was pregnant with Lisa Montgomery, so by the time Lisa was born, she had brain damage as a baby. Lisa's father left when she was a small child, leaving Lisa and her two sisters in the care of her mother, Judy. But here's the thing, Judy is a terrible person and a worse mother. She was violent and neglectful. She beat all of her children. I will get into that a little bit of what she did now, just, trigger warning. She would punish them by putting them in cold showers or whipping them with belts, cords, or hangers. She often would tape Lisa's mouth shut with duct tape so that she didn't have to hear Lisa speaking. Lisa Montgomery even recounts how she learned not to cry when the duct tape was over her mouth because her nose would get too stuffed up and she couldn't breathe. She even claimed on one occasion that her mother Judy killed the family dog just to teach the kids a lesson. Her mother Judy had multiple partners throughout her childhood, but ultimately got married 6 times. Lisa had an older sister. She was 4 years older than her. Her name was Diane, and Diane loved her. Her sister Diane tried desperately to protect her younger siblings from the mistreatment of her mother and the men her mother brought into their life. But Diane went through just as much torture herself. Lisa Montgomery's life was marred by violence, but her first experience with SA was when she was only 3 years old. It happened when she was with her sister Diane. Diane was only 8 years old, and she was being harmed by a male babysitter who was a grown-up. And a 3-year-old Lisa laid next to Diane in the bed while this was all happening. So somehow social services became aware of the danger in the house, and her sister Diane was removed from the house, but Lisa and her sister wasn't. Diane reported that as they drove away, she was overcome with fear over the fate of her younger sisters, to the point where she couldn't stop throwing up in the car. And unfortunately, she had every cause to worry, because somehow Lisa's life became darker, and it was about to become a living hell. Judy remarried a man named Jack Kleiner, and he was an absolute monster and described as a mean drunk. He was violent with everyone in the family, but his violence toward Lisa always had inappropriate overtones. And by the time Lisa Montgomery was 11 years old, she was the target of ongoing, frequent, and sadistic SA at the hands of her stepfather. He would sneak into her room at night and harm her in every way conceivable, often while smothering her face with a pillow. And if Lisa resisted, he would bash her head into a concrete floor so hard that she actually sustained a traumatic brain injury, MRI scans would later show. During these years, the family moved repeatedly. In the first 14 years of Lisa's life, the family moved 17 times. But their evil stepfather eventually moved the family to an isolated, run-down trailer at the end of a dead-end road. The trailer was filthy, and it had no running water. And the attacks by her stepfather were so frequent and brutal that he eventually built a separate room onto that trailer just for them, hidden from view, where no one could hear her cries for help, and he could attack her with nobody knowing. Lisa was completely on her own. Her mother Judy even walked in while Lisa was being assaulted by her stepfather. And instead of defending Lisa, her daughter, she was so angry that she went and got a gun and held it to her daughter's head and screamed at her, "How could you do this to me?" Lisa Montgomery started to drink wine as a means to cope because she lived with the fear and the constant terror and the constant anticipation that she was going to be assaulted. But somehow it still gets worse for Lisa. Over time, the violence escalated, and Lisa Montgomery's stepfather, Jack Kleiner, started to invite his friends, for lack of a better word, to gang SA her. The ordeals would last for hours, and the men would even sometimes urinate on her. She was treated like garbage. Actual garbage. Her mother started to sell Lisa's body to plumbers and electricians if there were jobs that needed doing around the house. The fact is that Lisa Montgomery's home was a hellscape. It wasn't a place of safety. It was a prison, and every hand that should have been lifting her up pushed her further into despair. She was abandoned by the very people that were supposed to teach you how to grow up during a time when you're developing your sense of identity and a sense of self. But by the time Lisa left that house, she was broken. And once a foundation is shattered that early, what chance does someone really have? Now, I know you're asking, with all of this happening, why did nobody step in to help? Well, people did notice that there were things going on with Lisa. Teachers noticed Lisa's neglect, friends noticed her distant behavior, and medical professionals learned about the violence happening in the home. But Lisa's mother controlled Lisa and threatened her with fear and violence if she said anything that was happening. But authorities were notified, but nobody intervened and nobody helped. Even during one of Lisa's mother's divorces, Lisa bravely testified about the horrific treatment that was happening at her house. And the judge scolded the mom, but nothing really happened, and no action was taken to protect any of the children in the home. Lisa Montgomery was not failed just once. She was failed repeatedly, systematically, and devastatingly. Just a quick note about this kind of trauma. Researchers estimate that about 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 6 girls are SA'd before the age of 18. SA is incredibly confusing and complex for children, for everybody. But childhood SA, if it isn't treated effectively, can have devastating long-term psychological consequences that persist into adulthood. And that's definitely the case with Lisa Montgomery. So just to recap where we're at. So Lisa has had brain damage since she was an infant. Lisa's trauma was so severe that it compromised her neurological functioning. And as a result, Lisa has trouble processing information, maintaining social relationships, maintaining her own hygiene. She loses focus during conversations and has trouble planning simple tasks. She also has several mental health disorders. From what I've found, it includes bipolar disorder, temporal lobe epilepsy, a dissociative disorder, and complex PTSD or CPTSD. And now we get into the next chapter of Lisa's life. So Lisa's only 17 years old at this point, and at her mother's insistence, Lisa became engaged to her brother, Kevin Montgomery, when she was only 17, and then they got married when she was 18. And unfortunately, it just plopped her into another terrible situation. He unfortunately continued the cycle of violence. He was just as violent as Lisa's parents and his parents. He even captured some of his torture on video with Lisa. Together, they had 4 children, but they lived in dire poverty. A social services document reported the family's living conditions, citing there were missing walls missing floors, no running water, no plumbing, no furniture or beds, loose wires, and children sleeping on the floor. Over the years, Lisa Montgomery's mental health was noticeably getting worse, with worsening dissociation episodes, anxiety, PTSD, and bipolar symptoms. And by the time Lisa Montgomery was 34 years old, she had moved 61 times, which definitely mirrors the instability she had when she was growing up. Lisa got divorced from her stepbrother husband and remarried, and another pivotal moment in Lisa Montgomery's life was this. After Lisa Montgomery's fourth child, at her mother's insistence again, Lisa Montgomery had her tubes tied, which had a devastating psychological impact on Lisa. After this, her episodes of psychosis became increasingly erratic and more serious. After her forced sterilization, Lisa began to falsely claim that she was pregnant. She began telling family and friends that she was pregnant, going so far as to make up due dates and prepare for the arrival of a non-existent baby. But these delusions were pretty clear examples of how sick she was and how fractured her mental state was. To Lisa, these pregnancies were real, and no one stepped in to set her straight or to address how concerning her behavior was or to get her any help. So 2 days before the crime, her former husband and stepbrother filed for custody of 2 of their children. At the time, she had told her new husband that she was pregnant, but her stepbrother husband knew this wasn't true because he knew that her tubes were tied. Her stepbrother husband threatened to expose her and said he would use the pretend pregnancies in court to obtain custody of the children. So the threat of losing her children, combined with the years of trauma and severe mental illness, pushed Lisa past the brink. Which brings us to December 6th, 2004, when Lisa Montgomery did something inconceivable. So another thing to know about Lisa Montgomery is that she loved dogs, more specifically rat terriers. She loved them so much she was part of an online community that loved rat terriers called Ratter Chatter. And it was in that online community that she met a woman named Bobbie Jo Stinnett. Bobbie Jo Stinnett was a bright, lovely young woman. She was married and they were expecting their first child. Lisa Montgomery told Bobbie Jo Stinnett that she was also pregnant, and so they would swap pregnancy stories. But remember, Lisa Montgomery wasn't able to get pregnant because she was forced to have her tubes tied by her mother. So Lisa now is 36 years old. She's battling severe mental health issues, including complex PTSD, bipolar disorder, and dissociative episodes. And something in Lisa snapped. Bobbie Jo Stinnett shared that her dog just had puppies, and a dark idea slithered into Lisa's mind. Lisa created a different identity. She made a new email address and called herself Darlene Fisher, and she made an appointment so that she could meet those rat terrier puppies owned by Bobbie Jo Stinnett, because maybe she'd buy one. So, on December 6th, 2004, under the alias of Darlene Fisher, Lisa Montgomery drove 175 miles from her home in Kansas to Skidmore, Missouri. When Bobbie Jo Stinnett answered the door, she was expecting Darlene Fisher, but was met by Lisa Montgomery. Lisa Montgomery overpowered a 38-week pregnant Bobbie Jo Stinnett. Lisa then strangled her with a piece of rope and then grabbed a kitchen knife and cut Bobbie Jo's baby out of her womb. The baby miraculously survived, and over the next several hours, Lisa attempted to pass the newborn off as her own. But Lisa Montgomery was arrested the next day after the horrific discovery of Bobbie Jo Stinnett's body. Investigators quickly realized that Darlene Fisher doesn't exist. They were able to track Lisa down the next day using her emails and computer IP address. The authorities found her cradling a newborn girl, and she claimed that she gave birth to the day before. But her story quickly fell apart, and she eventually confessed to the murder of Bobbie Jo Stinnett. Lisa Montgomery's trial, to say the least, was controversial. At trial, Lisa's original defense team catastrophically failed her. Critical evidence of her mental illness, extensive trauma history, and neurological damage was barely touched on. And instead of painting a full picture, which is, every lawyer's job, They gave a fragmented, shallow glimpse into her history. Interestingly though, Lisa's crime, though rare and horrifying, isn't unprecedented. Over a dozen women have committed similar crimes across the country. Lisa Montgomery is the only woman condemned to die for it. And despite Lisa Montgomery's documented mental illnesses, rather than pursue life imprisonment, the Bush Justice Department, led by Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, aggressively sought the death penalty. And then there was her legal defense. So Lisa's legal team was dominated by male attorneys. But the thing is that due to the trauma that Lisa endured as a child, gave her pretty intense trust issues, especially with men, which made it incredibly hard for her to open up and relate to them. Her team was also ill-equipped to deal with capital cases and with complex trauma cases. They were just out of their depth. The lead attorney's name was Dave Owen. Experts recommended that they bring in a specialist attorney that dealt with trauma. She was one of the most talented capital defense attorneys in the country, and she was a woman renowned for representing clients with severe trauma histories. And when Judy Clark began working with Lisa Montgomery, something amazing happened. Lisa, for the first time, started trusting someone. She opened up. She felt seen, valued, and heard. Judy Clark was a strong, capable woman. But unfortunately, the lead attorney, Dave Owen, is a fragile, egotistical baby man. Dave Owen, feeling threatened by Judy Clark's leadership, moved behind her back to have her removed from the defense team. So, without asking Lisa Montgomery and not talking to Judy Clark, a male federal judge severed Clark's connection to the case. Lisa Montgomery was devastated. Her mental state unraveled. She became inconsolable, terrified, and spiraled. Without Judy Clark, Lisa's defense team collapsed. Vital expert testimony about her trauma disorder, history of mistreatment, and childhood violence was never properly presented. And I'm not joking. During the closing arguments, her male attorney decided that instead of presenting a full story, she was just going to read a poem about assault. It just came off as bizarre and disrespectful, and the prosecution just mocked Lisa's experiences. They called everything she went through an excuse, and they just painted her as a bad mother who lived in a filthy home, and no one could really take her seriously. And after just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found her guilty and recommended the death sentence. While in prison, something else remarkable happened to Lisa Montgomery. She got proper psychiatric care and medication, and for the first time in her life, Lisa's conditions stabilized, but the mental scars remained. Even medicated, she'd have frequent panic attacks and would break out in hives if she was left alone in a room with a man. Fact is that Lisa Montgomery was failed at every stage by her family, her community, the legal system, and ultimately the very society that claimed to seek justice. Since her conviction in 2007, Lisa Montgomery remained connected to her children, and she even became a grandmother. She also accepted full responsibility for her actions and expressed deep, unwavering remorse for what she did to Bobbie Jo Stinnett. So more than 1,000 experts who advocated for mistreated and neglected children pleaded for clemency for Lisa Montgomery to try and get her death sentence reversed to a life sentence. But despite overwhelming evidence of her severe mental illness, her childhood of torture, the Trump administration moved forward with her execution. Experts argued that executing Lisa wouldn't bring justice, it was just going to perpetuate the cycles of violence and neglect that shaped her life. Renowned defense attorney Sandra Babcock, who represented hundreds of individuals facing execution worldwide, she even said, "I've never seen a case like this. I don't know of any execution in the US or elsewhere that has been carried out on someone who has been subjected to such unrelenting torture and violence." Sandra Babcock believed that if Americans knew the full extent of Lisa's suffering, they would never have supported her execution. But most Americans never knew the full story. On January 13th, 2021, Lisa Montgomery was executed by lethal injection. Her death was not just the end of one broken life. It was a culmination of decades of collective failure. And Lisa's execution left a lot of people asking, when a society punishes a victim of its own neglect, what does that say about the true nature of justice? Are we actually seeking accountability, or are we just continuing the cycles of violence? and abandonment that made Lisa who she was? These are questions that we continue to wrestle with. For Lisa Montgomery, for Bobbie Jo Stinnett, and for the countless others failed by the very systems designed to protect them. Lisa Montgomery's story isn't easy, and this isn't a story about condoning or excusing what she did. Mental illness provides an explanation, but it's never an excuse for violence. But Lisa Montgomery's story forces us to ask uncomfortable but necessary questions. What does justice mean when it's blind to suffering? What does punishment solve when the roots are planted in untreated trauma and generational neglect? And can a society claim to be just if it chooses retribution over rehabilitation for the most broken among us? Lisa Montgomery's story is a devastating example of what happens when cries for help are ignored, when mental illness is untreated, when violence is hidden, and when institutions look the other way. Lisa Montgomery's crime was horrific, and her accountability undeniable. However, her execution feels less like justice and more like a collective failure dressed up like closure. If we truly want a safer world, don't believe it'll come from silencing the wounded. It will come from treating the wounds before they become too deep to heal. And maybe the lesson isn't about Lisa alone. Maybe it's about us, about whether we're willing to confront the complexities of human nature, or if we prefer the simplicity of punishment over the hard work of understanding. Because more often than not, monsters aren't born, they're made. And if we're not careful, we'll keep making them. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. It means so much to me. I appreciate you being here and for holding the space to have these conversations. If you're interested in deeper dives, consider joining my Patreon. It's a place where we can continue to have these conversations, do deeper dives, behind the scene access, or you can just support the channel. And we can also connect more on a personal level. Thank you again for being part of the journey. Stay safe and stay curious. I'll see you for the next one.